Hello there, I'm Mr. Voss, and today I'll be reading you an escapade from the Chronicles of Alexander E. Treat, The Trouble with Females edition. See, I of all people am well suited to explain this work, as not only have I recently acquired a female myself, she has been upgraded to the prestigious wife position, might I add, but I am what some would deem an expert in this art of wooing women. Thus, whether we read of how Alexander is commanded to pursue them, of the time he sprays lemonade upon them, or perhaps are regaled by the tale of how his words are used to bring them to tears, in all such cases, I, Mr. Voss, will cast such words in a light befitting of only a proppin' woman wooer. But enough about me. Let's hear of Alex's daring adventures. When you hear this sound, Jake, turn the page. Our story begins with Alexander as he concludes the composition of his latest edition of his newest work, Life Update Variety. He then proceeds to spend copious amounts of time with his dear friend Joe as they drink liquids atop a dead tree overlooking the sprawling city of Fort Collins. Of what they spoke, I could never hope to know, but I have little doubt it was a conversation of legendary significance. Upon the conclusion of their conversation, they traveled back to Joe's humble abode and watched a play of heroes in Academy. I'm told it's quite good. As the sun brought about a new day, Alexander engaged in the labor of his trade, metalworking, until an acquaintance, less civilized than himself, beseeched to come observe the spectacle of his native land, known as rodeo. Rodeo. Thus Alexander, unable to be rude as to decline the gesture of goodwill, accompanied him and witnessed a great multitude of beasts performing acts that seemed strange to him, but with the visage of his friend, found great revelry in it. When, late in the night, he finally returned to his estate, he spent the time working to polish his masterpiece, Life of the Update Variety, before retiring to his room. Jake! Unfortunately, the day was not kind to him, as an urgent summons weighed upon his mind. Lady Molly demanded that he attend her quest at the crack of dawn, so he got nigh a wink before he saddled his phoenix and journeyed to the outpost at the edge of the rockiest mountains. And that's how the whole life of Nemo would have gone. But sadly, some of the best things, upon occasion, are not destined to be. And the venerable Jake Voss, the man who will be narrating this life of Nemo, willed it to not be so. So, if you're sad that this is a normal life of Nemo, blame Jake. Anyway, here's the actual life of Nemo. Welcome to the 32nd edition of Alex's Life of Emails. Alex, narrated by the Honorable Jake Voss. And when you hear the sound, Jake, turn the page. After I finished crafting the last life email, Joe and I talked among the night air atop a dead tree about many things, and we looked over the city. I must say, it ranks pretty high as far as talks with Joe go. We then watched My Hero Academia until 2:30 in the morning, which was good. The next morning, I went to work, and then Duncan called me up and was like, "Hey, I've got an extra ticket. Want to come to a rodeo?" And I was like, "Well, I haven't ever gone to one of these before, and I mean, free is a pretty good price, so I might as well." Thus, I attended. Now that I've done one, I think I can say I don't think rodeos are my thing. I mean, it's mildly interesting, and watching people try to rope top animals is like a real appeal, you know. But that Republican Nedbreck vibe thoroughly saturates the whole event. Not that I mind that, it's just that I'm too politically agnostic and too much of a nerd to fit in that group. Hence, it was a meh experience for me. Still, I did like it though. Anyway, after that, I worked on editing Last Live Email and came to watch. Oh, and I watched some anime before going to bed. Here's some pictures from the rodeo. Jake! Picture. I then proceeded to get a grand total of an hour and 30 minutes of sleep before going on a hike with the squad. It was a tolerable hike. I mean, there was like a solid hour where everyone inquired about my non-existent romantic life, and hence made up a hypothetical romantic life of Alex, which is actually way worse. Anyway, it was 98% death, but I lived. I then hiked up this stupidly hard path on my own, which was a big oof, but I finally made it to the top, only to discover the only way to the mountaintop I need to get to was a sheer ledge, about a foot, maybe two thick, and then a sheer drop of 100 feet of death. And see, I've already shivered along a death ledge, if you remember, and that wasn't the most enjoyable of all experiences. Hence, because I actually learned from my mistakes, I didn't do that, and instead sucked it up and hiked all the way back down without climbing the actual mountain I was trying to get to. I will, however, mention that I got really close to dying once more because, see, there's a super big snowbank. Okay, wait. Here, let me flesh this out a bit more so it makes sense. So, we're trying to climb this mountain, right? And basically, the established path would ensure that we'd reach the top, requires you to drop down to this, like, ravine of sorts before climbing all the way back up the other side. So my thought process was less work equals less work. And thus, instead of dropping to the valley and losing the elevation I gained, I was like, why don't I just climb, up this other mountain and then just go over the ridgeline to the recent mountain I can get the top of? We'll call the mountain I need to get to the top of Mountain A, and the mountain beside it, Mountain B. And here, I actually have a picture of the top of the valley I would need to cross. Maybe this will help. It's a big valley. So I climbed Mountain B, right? And might I say it was an arduous climb. About 2/3 of it was just straight up, as you can get without like straight rock climbing. Plus there was a snowbank in the middle of the climb that was super steep, so I'd dig my fingers in and get traction. But my fingers got so cold. Like, holy cow, you underestimate just how cold your fingers will get when you're clinging to a snowfield for dear life. There's not really a like, I'd like to, take that choice back, please, option. Anyway, that's not how I got quite close to dying. It was just mucho sketch. Thankfully, there were a few rocks that peeked out of the snowfield, so I was occasionally able to like stay on one of them and let my fingers warm up. Anyway, I climbed the stupidly steep incline, and then climbed to the top of the stupidly steep incline the rest of the way to the top of Mountain B. And I must say, at this point, I've been climbing for like 2.5 hours or so, and I was really tired. So yeah, after chilling at the top of Mountain B for like 15 minutes and regaining my strength, I then tread a 34% sketchy path to reach Mountain A, and was greeted with this. Jake! Which, if you can't ascertain from the picture, is not easily surmountable, and I would have to go full rock climbing mode with a backpack and backpack on to climb it. I've also done that before, and I am making that mistake again. I don't want to be able to yell "not dead yet" I want to be able to yell "not dead yet" for many years to come. So yeah, basically after hiking for 3+ hours, I found I couldn't reach Mountain A, and I was a bit sad. So upon realizing I have to go back down the same stupid way I came up, I looked to my left and saw a very large, very steep snowbank. And see, I'd never slid down a snowbank before, but I heavily considered doing it for the first time, as I wished to follow my earlier guiding principle of less work equals less work. However, upon staring at its excessive steepness and the fact there wasn't any leveling out at the bottom, and I just go straight into rocks, I barely decided against it. And gosh, in hindsight, I'm so glad I did. I actually think I would have died. And the reason I came to that conclusion is because after traveling most of the way back down, I hit this point where there was a snowbank less steep than the one aforementioned, and a lot shorter I needed to cross to get down. Here's a picture of it, by the way. Boop. So if you can't tell, the edge of the snowbank I was in front of, there's like a thin layer of snow before like a 15-foot drop. So I had to jump to where the snowbank was thicker so I didn't just fall through. So after a bit of hesitation, I jumped, and gosh, it was so slippery. Like, it was way harder to stop myself than I thought. And I barely didn't hit the rocks at the bottom because I leveled out some. Thus, I'm thinking, I'm 99% certain if I'd gone down the steeper, longer snowbank that didn't level out at the bottom, I would have been dashed against the rocks, quite literally. So yeah, in hindsight, almost died in a hike once again, but thankfully I didn't. And here I am. Look at me, learning from my mistakes. Jake! So yeah, that was the big sketch, but I made it back alive. I then talked with Duncan and Molly on the way back down, because I made Molly cry, so pretty move on my part. Once I got back from the hike, at 8, I basically collapsed and did nothing significant. I then proceeded to sleep for 10 hours before going off-roading with Sam and David, but David's Jeep broke, so we ended up just doing Death Mountain, or whatever it's called. Oh, we didn't end up doing Death Mountain, or whatever it's called, which I'm actually super glad for, because I seriously doubt Sam's truck could have made it up there. Oh, and we plowed through this mud puddle, but Sam left his skylight open, and his truck got covered in mud from the inside out. It's great. Here's a picture of us just off-roading. That wasn't the Death Mountain, by the way. That's just the easiest part before it. But yeah, instead we did an easier trail, which was still really fun. And the whole cars going to roll stressful experience was just better overall. Here's 2 pictures from that. Boop. It was a pretty good time. Anyway, once we got back from that, I took Grace to some store so she could buy something. I can't remember what it was. And then I recorded the last live email and sent it off to Joe. That Sunday morning, I joined Duncan and his sister, whose name I can't remember, at an Orthodox church service. And I was going to take a picture, but it seemed pretty disrespectful, so I abstained. Jake! So yeah, the liturgy was pretty cool, honestly. It was super reverent, and there was a bunch of incense. And there was even this part where they all bowed, and they brought out the Eucharist. As Joe likes to point out, I bowed to bread. Okay, but to be fair, I actually do believe in the real presence at this point in time. So I really do believe the Eucharist is Christ in some sense. And if any of you want to know my reasons for that conclusion, you should email me, and I'll let you know. Anyway, I did that, and it was pretty great. After that, me and Father Gabriel got talking, and then some other people joined in, and I asked them some questions that were sort of answered. I don't know, there were 3 people trying to answer the question, so it got kind of confusing. But yeah, overall, a good time. After that, I stopped by home before heading to Myers for some reason. I actually can't remember. Maybe their graduation? It's still weird that Cherry has graduated before me, and she's 2 years younger. That's at least 7% vexing. So yeah, played a lot of volleyball, which was good, and then did some ultimate frisbee. Before we all just chilled inside, and Joe and Jake tried to define a game contrary to the Wittgensteinian position that a term was not definable. However, they did manage a subjective definition of game, which was basically a tautology, but they still enjoyed the rhetorical defeat of my position, even though they didn't actually defeat it. Thus, I think they reveled in the experience. After that, we went to the basement and watched half of Hamilton before I decided to go home because that was a waste of time. But then, upon going home, Ben convinced me to binge the end of Dr. Stone with him, so I ended up wasting my time anyway. So yeah, that's how I ended the day. The following day, I worked before meeting up with Josh, Noah, and Joe to just hang at the park. The only important thing to know about that event is that we raced and I was fastest. Not to brag at all, though Joe did start faster. I suppose that ought to be mentioned. However, after I participated in that, and participated in what Joe has christened Brawl Boys, which I think is absolutely adopted. We did some Minecraft, which was tolerable, but then we basically gave Josh God powers and he just messed with us the whole time. However, it was also a big sad day as it was Ben Swalston's last day, and he had been part of Brawl Boys back when it actually began, when we actually watched anime. So yeah, it was a decent time overall, and we gave him a send-off of sorts, and then I got home by 1:30. The next day, I had work before I attended Ratchet Christie, in which there was a guy named Alexander who joined us for the first time, and I'm much happy he did, because he's the mucho knowledgeable as regards things Catholic. He's a Catholic convert himself, and hence has made things a lot clearer. He's provided some really good arguments for the papacy from the Bible, as well as some other stuff that has been mucho enlightening. So yeah, Catholic Legend of Alexander has now arrived on the Ratchet Christie scene. So yeah, I basically just skipped out on games and talked with him for 4 hours, and then we all joined in and played this pirate game that Liam brought. After that, me and Joe went on a drive and ended up picking up Ben, wherein he proceeded to state all the things about me he found vexing for quite some time, which was mildly informative, and hopefully Joe knows what he's getting into now. Still, the conversation overall was worthwhile. Once we got home, I slept and waited the next day to come upon my unconscious self. Jake! Okay, have any of you thought about how stupidly weird sleeping is? I mean, you basically just shut down for a time and cease to have control over your being. Like, that's real weird! I would avoid it if I could, but I don't have much of a choice, so I guess I'll just keep sleeping. Anyway, the next day I felt pretty sick, so I canceled social events and tried to power through and get some things done. I felt pretty trash, but managed to dump my old car parts, as I had, as well as get my missions test done. Yeah, I think pushing through like that made my sickness worse, and I was basically down for the count for the rest of the week. Yeah, getting home, I just watched anime in my diseased and mentally deprived state. I got bad sleep the following night, as one might expect. I spent the whole day watching anime, but I did manage to use my meager brain power to do something mild productive, which is to draw this half of a phoenix. See, for a while, I've been wanting to paint a phoenix in my car as it's kind of my victory lap since I finally conquered the car. So I decided that, since I can't do much else, I might as well try the foreign art of art. So yeah, I did art, and then watched Demon Slayer, an anime, which Ben and my cousin Toby was starting at my house at the same time. But yeah, not much productive stuff was done that time. The next day, Ben converted my drawing into Illustrator for me, and then he mirrored it, which I'm thankful for, because that would take me like a while to figure out how to do that. And here's how it looked. Jake! After that, I basically spent the day turning that into better art, of which here's a picture. I actually think it looks pretty cool, honestly. And I just put these canvases around. I found these canvases lying around the dumpster, so the project didn't even cost me anything. So yeah, I made a triptych, and now it lives in my D&D basement. So yeah, other than making that in a slow and inefficient fashion, because sick, I watched more of Demon Slayer, cleaned my dungeon, and talked with William, which we had been trying to do for ages, so glad that happened. And that night, I got like an hour and a half of sleep before a really bad abdominal pain, which kept me up for like the next 3 hours. I almost decided to go to the hospital. It was really bad. But hey, I'm not dead yet, so whatever it was probably wasn't anything damaging, right? My logic was infallible. Once the pain subsided, I got to bed at like 6 in the morning and slept poorly till 2. Yeah, that was a sucky experience. The next day, I worked on making a giant silhouette cutout from painting my car, which was actually so much harder than I thought it would be. I had to cut like 20 sheets of paper and tape them all together, and it took me actually ages. However, I did get this out of the process, which now graces my wall. So yeah, I made that, and then watched the Demon Slayer movie with Toby and Ben before heading to sleep. The following morning, I felt sick, but soldiered through, and finished making my stencil, and then getting it stuck to my car with sticky tack, which unfortunately left these little circles of not painted parts, which sucks, but what can I gotta do, right? And yeah, after like 6 hours of work that day, I finally got my car painted, and here is a picture. Jake! I've gotten many a compliment on that Phoenix. Many a complaint that Phoenix does not have a tail. But hey, I ain't changing it now. I also painted my hubcaps, so this is how my car looks. Which I personally think is pretty great, but you're free to disagree. So yeah, at this point in time, I was on the tail end of the sickness. So after painting, I drove Grace and Annalise to the store so they could buy some clay. I also caught up with Jordan before rounding out the night before playing some Brawl with Joe and Caleb. Monday, I went back to work, did a bit of college research, played Brawlhalla with the squad, and then did what they deemed impossible. I built a flying Minecraft ship. Now, I can see it didn't look nearly as good as I had imagined, but I invented my own flying machine, taught myself from the ground up how to make this. At the start, I didn't even know how piston worked. And yeah, my flying machines may not be the most efficient, but they could nevertheless carry blocks, which meant that the ship could work. And I still did it. They said it was impossible. Here's a picture of the flying ship. Also worked on the first try, so that was also cool. Boop. Picture of the ship. It was like 6 different flying machines all working together in sync. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. The next day I went to work, which was boring and average and all that jazz. I then went to Ratchet Christie, where we ate burgers, which was more decent, played games, and talked with Alexander about Catholicism again, because again, he's mucho smart. I then worked Moss. I listened to OnScript and learned that people are trees too. Wait, no, I mean, trees are people too. Got that big mix up there. And yeah, the scholar was basically arguing that since the Bible says things like trees will clap their hands, and the trees must be agents, along with the rest of nature. Thus, we must be super environmentalists. Jake! Anyway, yeah, it was among the more stupid of talks I've yet heard from people with PhDs. So yeah, I experienced that, and then I came home and read papers on the canon, and then Toby joined me, and we played Brawlhalla with the gang. I woke up early the next morning for some reason, which was something. I had a reason, but I can't remember it. Oh well, I used the time to talk with Mom, and we discussed things why, like, she should believe in the real presence, because let's be honest, it's pretty obvious, except, philosophically. Then it's kind of like death. But yeah, we talked and connected some, and I've been prioritizing that because Caleb told me to. I then read some more papers on scholarly stuff and went to Jake's bachelor party, which was decent. We played Ultimate Frisbee, which was good, and ate Chick-fil-A, which was also good. And then we decided to be dropped off somewhere in Loveland and try and race each other to a certain spot. But it turned out the spot chosen was the one that my group, Joe, Benj, and I, didn't know. So while the other two groups got there really fast, we walked in the wrong direction for ages. So yeah, that was less than maximally fun. But later we got to smack the girls with beach balls, and that was redeeming. Here are some pictures. Boop. Oh yeah, Jake got married, hence the bachelor party. So yeah, that ended, and Caleb, Noah, Joe, and I end up last minute deciding to drive to Horsetooth and chill for a bit. After that, Noah had to leave, but Caleb, Joe, and I stayed up till 5 trying to beat each other and guessing anime intros. So that was surprisingly entertaining. Jake! The next day I was sleep deprived, as one might expect. I donated plasma before talking with Esther, which was good, though short. I also talked with City for quite a bit, which was also good. By that point, it was like 10 or 11-ish, so I watched a bit of anime before going to bed. And then as I was falling asleep, I suddenly realized at 2 in the morning that Jake and Charity's wedding was today, not tomorrow. So I wrote a sleep-deprived letter and got them a quote-unquote gift, which may be a strong word for 2 hunks of plastic. But I did something at least. So yeah, I then went to said wedding, talked about advanced mathematical concepts, because Jake's friend is a nerd, whose company I actually enjoyed a lot. And then a lot of death happened, which I really don't want to recount. It was too painful. Anyway, yeah, Jake is now wed. So that happened. Look at Noah vibing right there. After the ceremony, we all went to Chick-fil-A and ate and talked. After that, I drove to Joe's house with Noah, where he basically was like, Alex, get married. Okay, his argument was just that, like, I should heavily consider it, but still, I was like, but please no? And that's how the conversation went. So yeah, we all played Minecraft and Brawlhalla that night. The next day, I joined Alexander and attended a Latin Mass, which was fancy. Also, sometime before this, I went to a church to check out some relics. I guess I forgot about that. But yeah, I did that. My insignia is now a 3rd-class Thompson Aquinas relic, so that's pretty fancy. Here are some pictures. Pictures of relics. So yeah, I did that and participated in Mass, which involved mutual kneeling, but they have these cushion kneeling things, so that makes it not nearly as painful. After that, I went on a ride. After that, I went on to Neo and Sydney's house early, because Brayden was going to teach me how to ride a motorcycle, which he did, and that was at least 10% informative. So yeah, we did that and then played D&D. And yeah, we're still in hell in D&D. We then did a Bible study, which was meh, and after that played some Halo and went on a pretty long walk, meaning me, Neo, and Carter. And we talked a lot, so that was good. Jake! The following day, I had work, just like all the other work days. I got home, watched some anime, read some papers, joined in some brawl wherein a very tragic thing happened, and my Kaya got 3-stocked by Joe's Zol, and per our agreement, that meant I play Zol, which I refused to do otherwise. So yeah, I lost a great deal that day. I will forever mourn my defeat. Takes a moment to sulk in the corner. After that, we played Minecraft, and Joe was so bored he wandered through my labyrinth and found a secret tunnel. Wandered through my labyrinth and found my secret tunnel to the Nether, which was very sad. After making all that work pointless, he then accompanied me and Caleb a late night drive to Waffle House, wherein we had a pretty good conversation. Oh, and man, there was this like high waiter that could not get off our case. It was actually pretty funny in hindsight. He apparently had a very hard time getting it through his skull that we were virtuous people. So yeah, we did that until some ungodly hour and then went to sleep. The next morning, I worked as per usual, but I didn't listen to any podcast episodes. I spent the 5 hours thinking, and it was actually pretty great. Rest of Christmas was pretty boring that night. Nothing influential was even discussed. But we did play a game of Catan, which I won. So that was great. I like winning. After that, I met up with Joe at like 12, and we drove to Horsetooth Reservoir and just chilled in the dock. I later found out that was illegal chilling. And talked, and I think it was probably the best conversation we've had to date. It was mucho better. The following day of work ensued, and I skipped the youth group for like the 4th time in a row to facilitate a clone meetup wherein I had Karina and Katie from Hiking meet each other. It was definitely awkward at forested points, but overall good. Oh, right. Well, except for one point. See, the hiking group had developed this stupid thing where my ideologies are my girlfriends, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So, when Katie started to share all the intricate details of such a conversation with Caleb, Karina, and Joe, I may have slightly freaked out and literally sprayed lemonade all over both Karina and Katie. It was super embarrassing. I would rather not relive it. I didn't care that I sprayed Karina as much because we're decent friends, and she's pretty forgiving. But I didn't know Katie all that well, and so that was a big oof. So yeah, that was not an enjoyable experience, but otherwise the time was pretty good. Well, with the notable exception of the urinal relic plan. We don't need to talk about that plan. So yeah, we did that, and then the squad decided to drive Risk Canyon, which was okay experience. There weren't a lot of good conversations, but nevertheless there was some decent vibes, so that was good enough. The following day, not a lot happened. I donated plasma, then hosted D&D, and that's about the totality of it. Jake! The next day, I met up with Father Gabriel, the Orthodox priest I mentioned earlier, and we talked for a few hours. I posed some questions he couldn't answer, but he was gracious about it, and humbly admitted he wasn't quite sure, so I must say that was admirable. After I got back from that, I noticed there was a free TV sitting in someone's yard, so I snagged it, and now I have a TV in my basement. Yay. I then went and played soccer, picked up bench in the process, and yeah, that was tiring but good. I'm quite far from peak condition physically, but I can, well, mostly, still play. Now, once that ended, I needed to drop off Benj, but he was attending Joe's family movie night, so I drove him there and dropped him off. And then Mr. James was like, "You're now invited." So I joined the movie night, which was mostly meaningless, but at least they watched Infinity War, which is a great movie. I left when they started discussing something so meaningless I blocked it from my memory. I then started on the prototype for this life of email, which Jake proceeded to reject, which was big sad, and then I went to bed. The next morning, I went to donating plasma once again, before attending the one-shot John was running, where we were stupidly overpowered characters on a suicide mission. It was okay. But he had this boss that just hit me. No save, no nothing. It was big vexing because my character was basically built not to be hit. And he was like, "I'm just going to ignore all that." But afterward, there was another boss that didn't just auto-hit, so at least my build matters somewhat. So yeah, I did that until late, and then Joe, Neo, and I decided to do a PvP where me and Neo tried to kill Joe's druid with potentially infinite life. We both know we wouldn't win, but we decided to try anyway, and as expected, we couldn't kill him. It was a real battle of attrition, but he would have killed us eventually at like 3 or so. So we were just like, guys, there's no point. We know how this goes, and so we called it. The next day I did my normal D&D and Neo's campaign, where we finally got out of hell. We then had some good conversations about stuff instead of Bible study, which I was down for. And then I read another scholarly paper on the canon before Neo and I drove through his canon, which was quite good. Maybe the best conversation I've had with Neo yet. Upon arriving back at my house, I invited Joe over, and we hung out in my dungeon and watched some of My Hero until about 2. The next day was Monday, so as per usual, work was engaged in. However, monumentally, I finally finished the last episode of OnScript. See, OnScript is a biblical studies podcast where scholars invite other people with PhDs in either biblical studies or theology to talk about like X topics. And it's pretty dry at times, but super informative. Plus, the hosts give everyone a hearing and just listen and ask questions, trying to, not trying to prove their guests wrong, which helps you get a good idea of what the actual scholars believe. So yeah, I finished that, and now I've listened to 250 hours of biblical studies podcasts. So if you have any questions about the Bible, I'm your guy. Anyway, I brought the squad along for some Ultimate Frisbee with the hiking friend group, which was good, but I got a bad cramp in my leg again, which was a bit sad. It was a pretty epic game, though. I had some good moments, but it was also so sad when Benj and I both laid out for a Frisbee and he got it. I was so close. Anyway, after Frisbee, we all tried a speed run of the Minecraft variety, but what we actually did was anything but speedy. Yeah, we all eventually gave up because the fortress is actually impossible to find. After that, Ben, my bro Ben, stuck around and we did some anime guessing until like 3 in the morning. And I think that he enjoyed it. Jake! The next day I worked and kind of just listened to random podcasts trying to figure out where to go next. After that, Ben took me to Alley Cat, his hip coffee shop he's been digging, and that's actually where I am right now, trying to write this life email as I actually dig the vibe. Anyway, he showed me Alley Cat, and I went to Ratchet Christie, which was Katie's last one before she moved to Texas. So yeah, we all hopped in Noah's car, and Katie and I may have illegally rode in the trunk, but we picked up a bunch of different food items, ate them, and then drove without Alan, because he's being responsible now, which is very big sad. And we drove to Estes and did a night hike, which wasn't quite a hike. It was more like a meander, but yeah, it was good. I got to have some good conversations, and I had a small chat. Oh, I had a small character building moment. See, on the way down, Katie and Liam were singing hymns and stuff, and I was like, nah, I ain't doing that. Then I was like, well, why aren't I joining in? And I realized my reasons sucked. So I ended up joining in the singing despite the fact that it makes me uncomfortable. So yeah, look at me growing as a person. I then went to work the next morning and went through more podcast searching, and then attended a youth group where we did normal youth group things. But for some reason, my leg hurts. So I was a bit sad. And then I talked with Dad, which was decent, before I went over to Joe's to play video games, and I realized this was a real waste of time. So I left, and I slept instead. And technically, that was 2 days ago. And I'm actually going to end it here, because yesterday I finished my D&D campaign, an Inconceivable Adventure, and I think that deserves an intro, so I'll wait to write about it. So, for now, that's all there is to be said. Hope you're all alive, and as always, hope to hear from you sometime in the future.